Hello, and welcome to Ad Age's custom webcast sponsored by Mountain. The topic of today's webcast is Don't Fall Behind this upfront season. I'm John Dioso, editor of Ad Age Studio 30, and I'm your moderator today. We have just a few quick items to go over before we begin. We'll hear from today's presenter, and then we'll open the floor to your questions. To participate in the Q&A portion of the webcast, all you have to do is type your question into the Ask a Question text area, and then click the Send button. You may submit the questions at any time during the webcast. We will address as many questions as time permits after our presenters' prepared remarks. Now, to get started, I'd like to introduce the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Mountain, Ali Haeri. Ali, take it away.
Thanks so much, John. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. It's always fun to present with Ad Age because this is a publication that I read and rely on, I should say, as a marketer. It's just really important to us. And so it's great to get together here today. And what we're going to talk about today is the upfronts. And just to spoil the plot a little bit, the point of this presentation isn't to say don't participate. We're not at all in any sort of position to try to talk people out of it. It certainly makes sense why it exists, but what we want to talk about today is how performance marketing can really be a important consideration in terms of how the upfronts works for people. And so another aspect of this too that's important is how a performance marketing strategy can supplement what you're doing in the upfronts as well. So we'll talk about that quite a bit. And so we'll start there. We'll start about how a performance marketing plan complements an upfront strategy. And then we'll take a look at performance-driven brand marketing, which is something that we've been seeing a lot of advertisers who specifically would be of the size to participate in the upfronts, how they're really kind of thinking about it. And my wife's cat is making a cameo here, so bear with me on that. Then we'll talk about what a performance plan actually looks like. What does it mean to actually incorporate performance into this the strategy? And then finally, we'll look at a real case study of an advertiser that is one that participates in the upfronts and what their sort of successes look like with connected TV, specifically with Mountain. And so, upfronts is upon us. I believe the first presentation is taking place on May 15th. Obviously, it's a time that brands are looking to make the most of their budgets. And obviously, it's a time where a lot of people are looking to lock in favorable economics. But there's kind of a sobering reality associated with that as well. One thing that we know is that if you're not P&G or you're not working with one of the largest agencies out there, you're going to get not the best pricing and not the best inventory. That's just a reality of how this process actually works out for a lot of brands out there. And so, again, it's not to say don't participate. There's certainly a lot of great inventory and opportunities to be had in participating in the upfronts. But really, it does, a reality like that, for example, really does call for, thinking and planning around the upfronts in a way where you have a supplemental strategy at play. Specifically, that supplemental strategy, I think it makes sense for that to be performance driven. Right now we're in an interesting economic moment. The economy is wobbly. I've read everything, but we're formally in a recession at this point. And savvy brands are really thinking about performance. And it's kind of weird to preach this because intuitively, you'd think that you want a lot of your marketing to just kind of serve some sort of performance-related goal. But again, this has not always been something that has been explicitly mentioned or been top of mind as a lot of people have made upfront commitments in the past. And so we're here to say that there is room for a performance marketing sensibility as you're constructing your upfronts approach. And so connected TV, something that I'm certain everybody who's tuned in here today has already thought about. You probably are familiar. I suspect most people who are tuning in have run a CTV campaign of some sort already. And really the interesting thing here is the fact that connected TV enables a lot more flexibility that the upfronts just doesn't provide. When you think of the upfronts, flexibility is not a term that really kind of comes to mind. when I think of the upfronts, I think the most flexible aspect of the upfronts is probably the component of optionable dollars that you get. But even that's kind of tricky. That can only be visited on a quarterly basis, and depending on all of the volatility that happens with a marketing operation over the course of a year, that may not be enough flexibility for a brand to really kind of make any sort of pivot throughout a year. But connected television, we're talking about programmatic advertising here, so it's inherently flexible in that case, and so it really is important to have a tool like this at your disposal to augment whatever it may be that you're doing on the upfronts with, say, linear TV buying, to really introduce a performance-driven component of whatever your strategy ends up being. And so what is that actual plan? What does it look like to introduce performance into this upfront strategy that you have? And so the really important kind of consideration here, again, is the fact that, we just a moment ago were talking about how, with a programmatic channel like connected TV, it introduces flexibility. What's also important to kind of understand, too, is that with that flexibility, really you're unlocking capabilities of performance. And so we conducted a survey with Advertising Week just a month ago. And one thing that we learned is that 64% of marketers view CTV as a performance marketing platform. And so it's just a new thing for TV advertisers to kind of consider. I think for a very long time, linear TV advertising was our only frame of reference as it related to television advertising. And we just sort of accepted a lot of aspects of it as being immeasurable and non-performant. But in this case, now with this programmatic channel that we have, it can be. And that's really kind of important to consider as you're making your upfronts plan. Because in a lot of instances, you can carry over some of the same assets or some of the same ideas behind the targeting, behind the networks that you're making deals with, but in a far more granular way and in a way that can be translated into measurable performance. And so just because I think it bears repeating, we're not in any sort of way telling people to not participate in the upfronts. It's an essential tool that you have as a marketer. It's a way to nab some really valuable inventory, namely live sports, which we've seen as being the final sort of meaningful use of linear TV advertising has been live sports. And so the upfronts is a huge opportunity to get in on some of that inventory. But, from a programmatic standpoint, as someone who's working on the digital side of the TV equation, we love the upfronts and the new fronts, because really what happens in that case is it really motivates publishers to come up with great new content that is appealing to the end user, and that drives more TV viewing, which is fundamentally good for all of us. And so to that end, we love new TV, we love exciting shows and celebrities and all of the fixtures of the traditional upfronts, because again, it's just going to represent more inventory for ads to be placed. And so what I'd say on the other side of it, though, is that especially in an instance where you're talking about making investments, a lot of times people throughout the year are, using their extra dollars on the scatter marketplace to try to pick up extra media buys. But this is a good example, it's a good moment to kind of talk about the fact that, CTV is inherently pay as you go. And so a lot of that money we've seen with advertisers that participate in the upfronts, but are also Mountain customers, they've kind of repurposed a lot of their budget dedicated towards scatter buys to actually just boosting their connected television buys. And again, they have that freedom to just kind of be as flexible as possible, change out creative relatively quickly. And so one sort of concept that I really want to emphasize here is this concept of brand meeting performance. And performance TV, as we kind of coin the term, is performance-driven connected television advertising. And it's been interesting seeing the development of it and to see how advertisers have been utilizing it. When you think of traditional linear TV advertising, you're thinking of probably the best showcase channel of brand marketing. And what's been interesting to see as there's been this proliferation of CTV and specifically performance TV has been how brand marketers have kind of changed what they've done now that they have all of this information available to them. So, in the case of a performance TV buy, it's still a TV ad unit. You still have that canvas of a 30-second or 15-second ad unit to get your message out. But now you have the added ability to sort of precisely target an audience on the front end of it. You can segment your messaging based off of the different audiences that you're targeting to, which unlocks a ton of creativity. If I could tell you or your creative agency that you're creating an asset precisely speaking to your target audience and not to a broad audience that just tunes into a specific TV show, it's going to unlock some really interesting creative ideas. And on the backside of it, after the ads run, with the granular reporting that you get from running connected television advertising, or in our context, performance TV, where you're going to be getting visit rates and conversion rates attached to your television campaigns, that's also an interesting input into the brand marketing process. Taking that data, giving that to your creatives and letting them know what specific campaigns actually impacted site traffic and purchases in the case of, say, like an e-commerce store. That's really, it's a really new concept for brand marketers to play with. But nevertheless, we've just seen brand marketers totally embrace this new influx of data informing what they're doing. And along the same lines of us saying, we're not saying don't participate in the upfronts. We just feel like there's a better way to think about it. This is the same. This point is along the same lines in that we're not saying, divorce yourself from brand marketing and just do hardcore performance marketing. We're saying do brand marketing, but now enjoy the fact that you have better targeting capabilities and better measurement on the backside of it to inform your next brand marketing campaign. And so developing the right creative is totally important as you're doing this. Back to that concept of flexibility and freedom, the alternative of doing this on linear TV is really difficult. Trying to change out creative for a linear TV campaign with all of the different approvals that are associated with that is brutal. Whereas in the case of connected TV, it's as simple as just pausing your campaign and uploading the new asset and then just going live immediately. And so that's just obviously an important consideration. There's other aspects of developing creative with performance in mind. I mean, there's some just tried and true best practices that we recommend to a lot of our clients, things like a persistent logo or URL throughout the ad, a very strong CTA at the end of the ad, encouraging a website visit. Keep in mind, you're not interacting with these ad units. There's nothing to click when you're seeing a commercial streamed on TV. Now, you may be wondering, well, how are we able to determine that a TV impression resulted into a site visit? I'm glad you asked. We have a technology called verified visits. MNTN has a very, very large device graph. It has over half of all of the households in the United States inside this device graph. Basically, when we serve an ad into a household, we have the ability, because you're putting a pixel on your website, just like you would for any other performance marketing channel. Whenever an inbound visit comes to your website, we have the ability to determine if the person that's visiting your website, if their household was served an ad previously as part of your advertising campaign. Now, if that first visit comes in from some other paid media channel, say they clicked a search ad or an Instagram ad, then we defer the credit to another platform. And we don't take credit for that visit because something else was at play. We think this is good for accountability in this case. But you have that capability of being able to precisely measure the impact of that. And for those of you that use Google Analytics, a platform like Mountain reports that session data into Google Analytics as well. So you could really, side by side with your other performance marketing channels, measure the performance of your CTV campaign alongside your search advertising campaigns and social campaigns as well. But really, the point here again is now that you gain that flexibility on the CTV side of your strategy here, you gain that capability of being nimble with uploading creative. This, along the same lines as the point we just made a moment before, unlocks again a lot more for marketers in terms of being in a place where you can test different creative. A lot of our large advertisers that again participate in the upfronts but also use the Mountain platform, a lot of them use CTV as a way to message test their linear TV buys. So we see advertisers that come to us and they're running evergreen campaigns, but say they get a new flagship asset or creative from their agency, they'll test out different sort of messaging, different voiceovers, different variations of this creative on CTV, and whichever one yields the best performance on CTV, that'll be the winner that they run on their linear TV buy, which is a really savvy way of kind of marrying insights from one and using it to drive performance on the other. Now, another thing that could be of some sort of interest to advertisers with this newfound flexibility, say you're a classical upfront buyer where you're not used to turning over your creative that frequently, but now you're doing connected TV in conjunction with your upfront buy, and you have this capability of turning over your creative more frequently. In this case, you may be in a scenario where you need to find a way to be able to kind of develop creative more quickly. Mountain last year acquired a company called QuickFrame. QuickFrame's a really awesome idea. It's a marketplace that allows anyone with a creative or a video creative need to be matched with over 5,000 different creators all across the world. And these creators sort of range from post-production editors to full-blown TV shoot directors, motion graphics artists, everything in between. And so, we've seen Colgate and Uber use QuickFrame to, again, just develop quick turn creative that still meets all of their brand guidelines. When you're using QuickFrame, it's not like some point and click interface where you're using some templated off the shelf asset. You're working with real creators. And so there's still a storyboarding component of it. You still transmit to them your brand guidelines. There's still a iteration and review process associated with it. It just all happens way more quickly than it would if you're doing this through your agency. This is another moment to pause and say, we're not saying don't use your agencies. If you have a creative agency, fantastic. A lot of the customers that we have that use QuickFrame have a creative agency. They still use them. They, again, just use QuickFrame to sort of meet a different but similar need, which is in this case, to kind of meet the needs of connected TV and kind of creating a steady flow of creative to be unloaded onto the platform. Now, another thing to kind of consider is the aspect of inventory, which is fundamentally the whole point of the upfronts. It's oriented around the concept of inventory. But as we talked about at the top here, if you're not with one of the biggest agencies, or you're not a PNG, you're not going to get the best pricing, certainly. And you may not get the best inventory. And that's just a reality of the whole process. Again, this is a different ballgame in the realm of CTV. You may end up with your sort of prestige buys on the upfronts, and that's great. But you're going to actually, on the CTV side of things, assuming you're using a platform like Mountain, you're going to get two really important things. One is volume. You're going to get a really good amount of impressions associated with your campaigns. And this being a performance marketing platform, these impressions are going to be optimized towards getting traffic to your site. which is really important. The other thing is the qualitative aspect of things too. With Mountain, we have this concept of living room quality, and living room quality basically means constraining the delivery of your programmatic campaign, which means that your ads will run across a variety of publishers, but constraining that delivery to just the most premium networks that we've identified. So it's just a couple of hundred networks. We see with other publishers, they just kind of have this thing open-ended, and they're picking up open market CTV inventory, and there's some really obscure CTV apps out there that suck up a lot of CTV inventory that's not performant in any sort of way, and also of questionable brand safety quality as well. And so in the case of Mountain, what is living room quality? It's the networks you could probably guess, CNN, ESPN, ABC, Peacock. These are the types of networks where your ads will run in this case. The other consideration too is, maybe you're a really savvy advertiser and you may say, well, I have access to my own DSP. I could just buy this stuff myself. First of all, yes, you're right. You absolutely could do that. I'm not saying you can't. But what advertisers who even have that flexibility afforded to them, why they still use a platform like Mountain is because of the obviously the efficiency of the media buying platform that Mountain has, but also leveraging Mountain's buying power. So Mountain has direct deals with most of those publishers that we have in that living room quality kind of grouping. We have direct deals with them and direct integrations with SSPs directly. And so in leveraging Mountain's own sort of relationships with these publishers, you're going to get the most preferential pricing possible, as opposed to trying to get that premium inventory with open market pricing. It's just going to be backbreaking from a cost standpoint to swing something like that. Next, just kind of, there's this concept of just hitting targets. Whatever your KPI is from a performance marketing standpoint, that can be carried over into the realm of television advertising. So we have advertisers that show up to Mountain with a return on ad spend target or a effective cost per acquisition target that they're looking to hit, and they're able to do that. This is a sort of an objective-based advertising platform where you put in your budget, but you indicate what your target is, whatever that KPI is. Again, whether it's going to be something that's ROAS related or CPA related, you precisely input that goal, and the media buying platform is going to optimize against that goal. It's been fascinating to see a lot of sort of traditional performance marketers who are used to having that capability for social media and search advertising. It's been amusing to see them for the first time inside a platform that is facilitating TV advertising offer that same sort of capability to them. And so again, this is programmatic advertising, and what's going to happen here is leveraging a wide variety of publisher networks to show impressions to users who have a high propensity for site visits and conversions. And again, if you're on the other side of it, if you're a traditional television advertiser, a linear TV advertiser, this might be a pretty foreign concept to have your TV buy so tightly connected to the concept of performance outcomes. And another thing that's been kind of interesting too is how metrics are sort of associated with your campaigns. In traditional TV advertising, there's a huge time delay to receiving reporting back, and there's also just inherent vagueness to the way that the impact of a TV buy is actually measured. And considering the fact that a lot of you are still going to be doing the upfronts, that's just still a reality. It's a remnant of the linear TV days that we just have to kind of live with. That way of measuring the impact of those campaigns. But on the connected TV side of things, there's actually, again, quite a bit of granularity to the reporting. If you haven't picked up on it by now, this in some manner is indistinguishable from other performance marketing channels. And another way that it is in the actual reporting that you get from running these campaigns. So in the reporting, again, what you can expect from CTV campaigns or performance TV campaigns specifically, I could speak to Mountain, is performance-based metrics. So we just talked a moment ago about return on ad spend and cost per acquisition metrics. Remember, you're placing a pixel on your website, and so that pixel is also providing information in terms of visitors to your website, transactions that take place on your website, order IDs. If you're an e-commerce store, the pixel can capture the order IDs of the specific orders that were driven from your television campaign. And then, stepping away from reporting for a second, and back to that theme of just TV as a performance marketing channel, all those same performance marketing best practices that you're used to apply here as well. So you can run a retargeting campaign on TV. In fact, we do it. If you visit the Mountain website and then stream some television, you're likely to see our own advertising follow you on television. And so that's like a just tried and true classic performance marketing play, a retargeting campaign. But since the pixel is running live on your website, you can do that same sort of thing. You can retarget users with different TV creative, and you can segment that too. By the way, if you have different categories to your business, you can sort of segment accordingly and run ads based off of that. Now, I wanted to talk about an advertiser, and we're kind of wrapping up here, but I want to talk about an advertiser that is a national pet supplies retailer, a very big one. I assume you could probably figure out one of two of the very biggest ones. They were already running traditional TV and CTV campaigns. And what they specifically were looking to do when they came to Mountain was to augment their top funnel TV efforts, but they wanted kind of like a performance marketing sort of sensibility in their top funnel TV efforts. And so the aspects of the Mountain platform that they were leveraging were related to audience building. So they were taking advantage of the third-party audience capabilities, that granular audience targeting capability that I was just kind of talking about a moment ago, where it's affinity-based, in-market-based, interest-based, the sort of audience that you would use in like a social media targeting campaign. They were actually using that sort of precise targeting for their top funnel campaigns for prospecting, and then also the reporting. They were also interested in kind of having a far more granular view into the performance of their television campaigns. And so I have some data. And so in using our integration with the Oracle Data Cloud, through the Oracle Data Cloud, we have 80,000 audience segments that are refreshed continuously at no extra cost to advertisers, free to use Oracle audience segments for your prospecting campaigns. This is the sort of performance that they got. For this campaign, they had over 10x ROAS, cost per visit of just over $1, which I can't speak for them necessarily, but for a lot of our advertisers, they're getting cost per visits well below what they're seeing for their YouTube campaigns. A really healthy visit rate of over 11%. And generally everyone's going to get a really high video completion rate just by virtue of the user experience of streaming TV advertising, because they're unskippable ads. We only serve unskippable ads on the platform, so it's going to be a high video completion rate. One thing I could say anecdotally, speaking to that visit rate, is at Mountain, you may have seen some of Mountain's ads before, because our chief creative officer is Ryan Reynolds, and we run ads with Ryan on connected TV. And our visit rates are also sort of in line with visit rates like we see here. And it's just a huge driver of traffic to a website. And you may be wondering, well, you have Ryan Reynolds. Well, I mean, this is with Ryan Reynolds not being involved, and we very routinely see customers get really healthy visit rates from their campaigns And it's not because a celebrity is involved. It's because they're running an ad against a very targeted audience, and there's just no waste, or very little waste, I should say, compared to the alternative of running ads on linear. And so just to kind of wrap things up here, a couple of takeaways that are kind of important. First is, again, we're in this weird economic moment, and with that sort of uncertain economy, it's really important to kind of introduce performance marketing however it makes sense to do so. I think, as a marketing leader myself, the performance piece is under a lot of scrutiny right now. And so I'm certainly always trying to find ways that I can drive performance. And in our case, it's B2B. But same point. I'm under a microscope to drive a measurable impact on the business's bottom line. And so I think, especially right now, it's everyone's kind of sensitive to that sort of thing. Second takeaway I just want to reiterate is rethinking brand marketing now with the capabilities of performance television. The precise audience targeting, the A/B testing capabilities, the performance metrics after the campaign's run, it's reshaping brand marketing in a really new and interesting way. The first campaign that we ran with Ryan at Mountain started because Ryan had the question of, can I just talk to our target audiences, performance marketers? And he said, can I just talk to them? Can I just have an audience of performance marketers? And we said yes. And the very first creative we ran with Ryan is Ryan speaking straight to a camera, saying, hey, you probably work in performance marketing. Let me tell you why Mountain's great for you. And so, brand marketers now have that capability of just kind of really having the space to speak freely to their target audience. And so really take advantage of those capabilities, possibly to augment, what your higher level campaign on linear TV may even be. Depends on how big your linear TV buy is. But if that's highly visible, continuing the message on CTV could also be an interesting idea as well. And then finally, the aspect of creative and utilizing the different sort of resources that you may have available to you, possibly QuickFrame, to be able to create variations of your creative on an ongoing basis to, again, ensure performance. And one final point related to that is, again, how you think about having your upfronts driven, perhaps linear TV campaigns work in concert with your CTV campaigns. Not only, as we just mentioned a moment ago, can you have some sort of messaging related continuity between the two, but you can also kind of offload the performance aspect of things, or maybe the CTV represents the more down the funnel users, in which case it drives a stronger call to action than you would on, say, your linear creative. It totally makes sense to kind of think about these things in concert with one another. And again, our biggest advertisers are doing precisely that. That's all I got. I think we have time to do some questions here, so happy to go through that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, so we're now ready to open the floor to questions. As a reminder, if you haven't done this already, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question to the Ask a Question text area and then click the Send button. So let's get to it. We got a bunch here, Ali. Great presentation, by the way. I think we did an entire webcast without mentioning AI, and I'm extremely happy.
I was fighting it, but I really wanted to mention it.
Yeah. Speaking of the future, though, okay, first question. How do you see the future upfronts changing based on the streaming environment?
This isn't a very satisfying answer, but I think it's kind of wide open. We've seen Bob Iger go on record to say some pretty interesting stuff related to the future of the upfronts, and that's coming from the publisher side of things. And so it's going to be interesting to see the way it plays out. I know from Mountain's perch, as I mentioned, the fundamentals of the publisher side of the upfronts equation totally benefits us, because that just represents more TV viewing activity and therefore more opportunities to to have ad inventory. But broadly, in terms of how we're seeing it kind of shape the streaming environment, I don't know. We just are entering a writer's strike that, as I've seen, is
Right.
a pretty big theme to that is the proliferation of like streaming. So I think streaming, everyone's kind of coming to a reckoning with the realities of streaming, and so my own sort of speculation is that there's always going to be an appetite for kind of front loading the purchase of a large block of valuable inventory, especially when we finally see live sports exist and perform well in a streaming environment. Then I think it's going to be interesting to see how the upfronts rallies around that. But these large media companies are so used to it, and there's still such a large appetite for sort of pre-purchasing a large swath of inventory to be used for a wide variety of campaigns. So I'd say, long-winded way to say, I think they'll certainly still exist even in a like entirely streaming focused world. But we're cheerleaders of just more creative, more shows, all of that.
Right. Talking a little bit about technology, I think I'll use another follow-up question. This one comes from Henry Ederson Young. When you were talking before about the capabilities of the platform, he asks, aren't there a lot of TV ads, especially OTT, that are now QR coded with immediate NBA capabilities that are measurable? And, also in line with that, I know a lot of OEMs who are actually getting to the game are creating their own app ecosystems to be able to click on ads. Streamers like Peacock, there will be like a BMW ad or something will pop up, and you can literally use your, Roku remote to get to follow up on it. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, totally. I get asked a lot, not unlike the question that was first asked, like, what is the outlook on TV advertising as streaming is kind of picking up? And for me, it's always that I think it's just going to get a lot more interesting, and for the reasons that you just mentioned. We've been experiencing the like classic 30-second static, TV ad unit for, I don't know, man, I want to say like 70, 80 years at this point. It's kind of crazy to say. And it's time to kind of rethink what that actually is. And so, we've seen a lot of companies out there kind of reimagine the television ad. We're doing that ourselves. At Mountain, we have a whole R&D team that is just kind of, for us, we kind of feel like the actual delivery of TV ads is kind of a solved problem mostly for us. And so we're already looking ahead towards also kind of rethinking what that TV ad experience actually is. Now, back to Henry's question specifically, I've been informally and also formally noticing a lot of QR codes kind of used inside ad units. I don't know if it's Coinbase that we have to thank for that with the Super Bowl ad, but it's been
pandemic in general.
The pandemic broadly. Yeah, I know. Every menu is also a QR code too, right? But it's something that we've been seeing, and it certainly works. But that also kind of speaks to the fact that that's like the perfect thing to test as an advertiser. If you have a platform where you could just kind of like run an A/B test, it'd be interesting to just kind of throw up one that has like a persistent QR code. Or, even if you want to get really granular with it, testing the placement of the QR code, other things like that. But we're seeing a huge trend with our advertisers actually doing that, and the fact that they continue to do it kind of indicates to me that it's working. That being said, just to be clear, you don't need the QR code to definitively know that the person who has served the TV impression actually wound up on your website later. Again, there's cross-device tracking technology, like I mentioned now, that's pretty robust that can help sort of make that connection for you. So don't purely do it just to be able to track whether the TV ad drove the visit. Where it does help, though, I'd say on the flip side of it, is if you really want to continue the TV viewing experience to like a precise landing page or some specific experience that has continuity with your TV ad, the QR code's great because then you can force them into a very specific page.
Right. And, you mentioned it before. Is this what tools like QuickFrame help create the various iterations to kind of activate on this type of behavior that's kind of, it's really only just now being introduced to viewers, and we're just kind of getting used to it. It's like, why is this Peacock show telling me to click on this thing? It's annoying me. At the end of the day, if I'm really interested in that ad, I'm going to click on it.
Right. Yeah, and a lot of people show up to QuickFrame kind of with that sort of testing in mind, where they'll come in and the QuickFrame creator will create a single asset for them, but they'll get like 5 different variations of like a different end card on that, whether with a QR code or a different CTA. Again, this is another example of like performance marketing sensibilities being applied to television.
Right. Let's get back to another question. So what has been the biggest benefit to you thinking about the intersection of brand and performance marketing? I mean, you've been talking about a lot of this, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's been that. It's been the point that I made earlier, specifically being able to tailor creative to audience segments. I gave that example that we did with Ryan, where we spoke directly to performance marketers. And we've seen other advertisers. I think a good example of this has been B2B, where linear TV advertising has like long been a no man's land for B2B advertisers, just because in a scenario where you're targeting by TV network and or TV show, really the only B2B advertising I see on like linear TV is like on golf on a Sunday. You see like an ad for Boeing. Like, I don't know what you do with that, but with like B2B, with connected television, B2B is now free to actually run TV advertising, because there's a ton of audience segments that are dedicated towards B2B advertising. If you sell ERP software, there's an audience segment. Miraculously, there's an audience segment out there for people who are responsible for pulling the trigger on ERP software, and you could create a television ad for them. And so that's I think probably the most exaggerated but true example of how this like granular targeting is unlocking a lot of creativity.
Right. And let's see. A question from Christian at Coldwell Banker. Let's see. He actually had a couple of good ones here. Let's go with his first one. Is there a network platform that you recommend or have found to have the best ROI? YouTube, Hulu, Peacock, etc.
So, full disclosure, I work for one. So like, I certainly would say Mountain, but I want to be fair, and I don't want to come off salesy. And what I'd say here is, like, my observation as a marketer, not as someone who's worked for Mountain, has been in seeing successful campaigns where people are running connected television. What I've noticed is that there's some aspect of like spiritual similarity between the audience that you're trying to target and the platform that you use in this category. And so what I mean by that is, like, I've noticed that like upstart D2C brands do really well with YouTube, for example, like a YouTube pre-roll. And again, I think the idea there is the fact that their audience fundamentally, even though their audience is being targeted precisely with the campaign, their audience fundamentally can be found on YouTube. And I feel like there's a very high level matching that kind of takes place there, where again, with Hulu, there seems to be, in my sort of observation, a category of advertisers on a very high level that seem to succeed with Hulu, because the subscribership of Hulu, just in a very broad sense, aligns with their target audience. And then from there, they do more precise targeting towards their target audience. And so to that end, I'd say, do some kind of observations of the core, high level audiences behind these platforms, and see which one has the best alignment with your own sort of target audience. In the case of Mountain, the reason why Mountain is broadly flexible is because we're we link together all of the disparate publishers, including Peacock in this case. We link together all of those disparate publishers. And so an advertiser comes to a platform like Mountain with creative and a target audience in mind, and we'll hit them on any which one of these platforms that they may actually be streaming television. So it certainly works in the broadest use case, but it also works in a very narrow use case as well.
Right, and his next question was actually kind of a follow-up to this,
Yeah.
which is, would you recommend putting all your budget into one CTV network or splitting the budget between multiple? So you're really, I mean, it's kind of like testing and,
Yeah,
intervention, seeing
I
what
think
works, right?
I think the point there is like if you're really trying to approach it as a performance marketer would, a platform like Mountain would, objectively speaking, would be the best approach for you because it's going to have a spread across a wide variety of publishers with the largest amount of audiences to hit with a very large identity graph that's powering all of the targeting. So you want that broadness with a media buying engine underpinning the whole thing. If you're a performance marketer, that would make the most sense. Now, the alternative to that point of putting your budget into an individual, I think, I assume Christian means like a specific publisher. Where that makes sense is, if you're a brand marketer and you have a very precise vision for the execution of your campaign, again, not unlike what you'd probably be doing on linear TV, there's a scenario where that makes sense, where you go to an individual publisher because that aligns with your vision. If you're if you're representing a product that is health focused, it might make sense to kind of go to a individual network that has an audience of that sort of interest. There's certainly still a scenario for that, but if you're approaching this like a performance marketer, you want something that kind of runs across a lot of these publishers.
Great. Let's see what else we got here. Let's go to one that's more specific about the upfront. And this question is, do you recommend I use different creative to run a performance campaign alongside my upfront buys?
Yeah, this is one of those just like generalized kind of best practices is running variations of your creative throughout your media buy just always kind of makes sense. And again, as we do in the performance marketing side of things, you run campaigns for a certain period of time, identify the winner, and it certainly makes sense. Now, how you coordinate that with your actual upfront, your linear creative that you're kind of running as part of your upfront buy, that's where things get really interesting. And I think the point that we kind of made at the end of the presentation there would be a really interesting one for a brand to pursue, which is having your CTV creative be complementary to your upfront creative, but more so in a sense that treating your linear buy as the topmost funnel creative, and then your sort of like mid-journey, mid-funnel creative being your CTV creative. Coordinating it, or at least thinking about it in that sort of way, probably makes a lot of sense as well. But yeah, absolutely. It's always a best practice to do so.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger spend is usually on those big linear buys because you're going across the biggest channels with the most eyeballs, but you can still iterate those things and use the creative and use the tools that are available, like we were talking about before. Do that. Great. Let's see. Another one just came in. This is a good one. This is from Sophia at Culture Flipper. What do you think of multilingual ads? Oh, disappeared. Sorry. That kind of dropped off. Let me go to the next one. Hold on a sec. Oh, this is one that I really want to. This is one that I really want to hit. The biggest thing that's going on heading into the upfronts this year, it seems, and it has been for a number of years, but even more so. Talk about disruption. It's really everybody's talking about measurement, and you kind of hit this before. But the specific question is, can I measure connected TV the way that I measure my other performance channels? But with so much, I'd really love you to kind of dive a little bit deeper on that and talking about all the changes that are happening that are in the headlines now. So obviously, Nielsen didn't go to the Joint Industry Committee. There's, measurement tied into, currency, basically. So you talked before about all the great metrics that you get out of CTV, very much in the digital world and very direct and quick and all that stuff. But there still is a kind of a question. And I think, is it more of a perception from, the bigger players and what the actual capabilities are? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think there's still a little bit of like an education gap that's happening here. I've attended some industry events where the audience was, classically linear TV publisher side people, and whereas I was sort of expecting like a really firm handle on the fundamentals of connected television, instead, there's still a lot of those folks, I don't want to say all, but like a lot of them are still making sense of how programmatic advertising works. And a lot of them are surprised to see the granularity of the data that you can get, because they've never really been on the performance marketing side of the house. And a lot of these organizations, these are entirely separate teams. And so I think really there's an aspect of this is just simply knowing what is actually possible in the way of actual reporting. And it's been interesting to see people who have relied on Nielsen reports for decades see the granularity of a connected television report as opposed to whatever the most equivalent report would be from a Nielsen. And so, yeah, it's been interesting as an industry to kind of see Nielsen trying to adapt, and I think it's admirable what they're doing on that measurement front. But as you kind of mentioned, like they're being cut out of like some pretty foundational standard setting of the future of TV advertising measurement. And so I really do think that the future of TV advertising measurement is going to be, very similar to the way that a lot of, performance marketing measurement actually looks. And a point that I made before, but I got to beat this dead horse is, I think there's rarely a scenario where it's not useful to understand direct activity that has been driven from a television advertising campaign that you've run. Brand awareness measurement certainly is always important. We do a lot of it, but it only helps to get granular digital marketing related measurement for campaigns. But again, I think there's an education that just needs to kind of take place broadly to catch everyone up.
Well, it certainly is an extremely interesting time in the TV space. So this is the perfect time to have this conversation. Thanks, Ali, for doing this today.
Of course.
I don't know if your cat is a member of SAG. If they are, we'll get them some royalties on this. But I want to thank everybody else for joining us today. We've reached the end of our time. Thank you for attending Ad Age's custom webcast sponsored by Mountain. A few reminders before we depart. You can view and listen to this presentation on demand using the same link that you used to attend today. You'll receive an email as soon as the archive is ready. On behalf of Ali at Mountain, thank you so much for your time and have a great day.